Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Teacher Talk. Today we visit Education Week and meet Ariella Rosenberg from ORTSA, a non-profit developmental organization that believes in the philosophy of educating for life. Ariella has a very interesting story to share regarding introducing the Singapore maths method into South African schools. Let's join her.
When we're looking at Singapore, I think it's important to look at the history of Singapore. And in 1965, when they were split from Malaysia, that's the picture. I mean, it's a picture worth more than 1,000 words. I mean, it's unbelievable where they were to where they're now. When you go to Singapore now, it's like a futuristic city coming from a movie of Back to the Future in 2020. But in 1965, when they were split from Malaysia, you can see the statistics. I think that something had to be done. They had what the Department of Education has done there. They have sent a delegation to worldwide to look at best practices in math and in science. And they realized since they split, they left with the only resource was human resource. They had no resources, nothing. They had water and meat and everything else they had to import from other countries. They realized they had to invest in the human resource, and that's why they've invested a huge amount of efforts and human capacity to look at their curriculum. And when we look at the TIMSS, which is the Trends in International Mathematics and Science Study, and what's interesting here is to look at Singapore in the orange compared to the international, which is the white. And there are two trends very interesting to look here. The one is you can see that Singapore is performing in grade 4 level and grade 8 level. In the three different levels of difficulties, they're performing better than international, they're performing better than other countries. But another interesting data to look at is when you look at a learner's performance in grade 4 and you compare them to grade 8, Singapore consistently performs well. So if, for example, we look at the intermediate level, and they performed at the 92%, at the grade 8 intermediate phase, the 88%. When you look at the international, intermediate level, it's 67%, going down to 46%. So that's another interesting data to look at when you look at Singapore. Another interesting, TIMSS also does, the trends also look at the rate of the enjoyment of students of math and science. And Singapore, what's interesting here also is that Singapore, compared to high-performing countries, ranks first in their attitudes towards math. And what we find very interesting in township schools where we run the Singapore math, the children and the teachers love it, love math. And we had some cases where we met with district officials where they were saying, or with the school management team, and they were saying to us, our worry is that the teachers are spending way too much time doing math and doing other things. Which I guess in one way it's a worry, but that was a good positive thing about the use of the Singapore math. Another report that comes from the World Global Forum is the Singapore ranked #1 in quality of education system and math and science education. Now, when we look at all these slides, I think you can understand why is it that private schools and us as ORT and NGO are looking into Singapore and saying, what is it they're doing and they're doing right? Can we learn from them? And you know, Bloch was saying before, let all public schools have swimming pool. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, let all public schools have quality books based on soundproof curriculum that private schools are using. Let's look at 3 cornerstones of education in Singapore. One interesting thing in 1965 when they were split, also to understand that Singapore is the 4 main cultures, Chinese, Malaysian, Indonesian and Indian. And it was decided by government as policy that English will be the language for education. You can imagine that 70% of the people who were Chinese were not very happy with this decision. Math was taken as one of the main subjects to develop intellectual competence, and science to nurture curiosity to explore things. And the curriculum emphasis is on problem solving, critical thinking and inquiry. And I'd like to show you, this is the mathematical framework. Wherever you go in Singapore, if you go to a school or you go to the National Institute for Education, doesn't matter who you talk to, when they describe to you the mathematical curriculum, they will show you this diagram. And this diagram describes what the emphasis is. And the core of the curriculum is the mathematical problem solving. And the emphasis is on the development of mathematical concepts and the ability to apply them in mathematical problem-solving situations. Another very important thing to know about the Singapore math is the spiral curriculum. And I think it's important to know it when a school is looking to apply that methodology. And this is also a theory that comes from Jerome Bruner. And what it is, and it's comparing, when I was talking to mathematicians, and they were saying, when they study the circular curriculum. And what's important about the spiral curriculum is that the subject or a topic or idea is repeated each time at a higher grade, but it expands. That's why it's a spiral. It expands to a higher level of difficulty and in a greater depth. And there are two elements to look here, and that's why when we brought in the Singapore method, when we implemented it in township schools, we started from grade 1. We realized we can't get into grade 4, because in Singapore, in grade 2 to grade 6, let's say you do the fractions, a teacher will cut an apple at grade 2, she will not do it again at grade 3 and grade 4 and grade 5. There is the assumption that the children have learned or grasped concepts at a certain stage, and then they go up from there, and they go into a greater depth. And that's why it's so important when you are applying the Singapore math, is to look at the phase approach. You go from grade 1 and up, or grade R and up, and the other element is that you have to know that as a teacher, if you're using Singapore math, you have to complete the curriculum. These three elements of success, are elements of success that were identified by Singapore. Why are they succeeding in the math? And we took those elements of success from all South Africa's perspective and looked at those elements of success and tried to apply them in our projects. One of the elements was the quality of books. Use of learners get textbooks and workbooks, teachers get a pack, which includes a teacher's guide, it includes reteach, enrich, tests and homework book. And the other element is, in Singapore they call it tests, we call it year assessments. In our project we have actually took, in Alexandra when we did a pilot, we did the HSRC testing of the learners, all of them, to see pre-project and post-implementation. And we also did teachers' assessment before and after to see the impact of the project. The other element is the teacher's professional development, and this is crucial. You cannot bring new curriculum or new materials without having a proper teacher's training, and I'll talk about it more. Another thing we looked at is what are the teachers' needs. Before we brought in the Singapore math into township schools, we wanted to look at also the needs from the teachers. And here we're looking at progressive introduction of concepts. And I think that in the previous session, there was a question, how do you make sure that the concept you're introducing are introduced in a progressive manner? More varied and manageable engaging activities that are active and engaging. More creative and challenging problem sums for your higher ability learners. And what that Singapore also has very good is the differentiation for lower ability as well. This is a very brief graph to show you the process that ORT went through with the implementing Singapore math. We started in 2007 in Alexandra Township with doing a research. And we realized that, that bringing something like Singapore math, which the textbooks and workbooks are in English, is a concern. And therefore, 6 schools actually were using South African curriculum materials, and 6 schools were using Singapore math. In 2010, from 2008 to 2010, JET was involved in the research and the external evaluation. and we've already presented quite a few papers on the findings, which I'm not going to present here. In 2010, you know, when you do good things, people do hear about it. We've been approached by the various district Department of Education, and we extended the Singapore Math into 30 other schools in Soweto, Springs, Tembisa, and Orange Farm. And using the same idea of phase approach, starting grade 1, going up to grade 2 the year after, and going up to grade 3 and so on. Also very important to look at our approach, a model for training. The one element we looked at using the math framework from Singapore, using high quality materials that were developed in Singapore, and providing those materials to every single learner and every single teacher received a pack. The other element was the teacher empowerment. We realized that in order for this to succeed, teachers have to get proper training. They received weekly training of 2.5 hours, and sometimes school holidays were taken as well. I think that also what we want to see is teachers and learners' attitude towards math. And I think I've mentioned it before, but many times obviously the learners would not know in Singapore math. They would say, we want to use the red book, teacher, we want to use the red book. I didn't want to put the names of schools, but just to give you an idea of the performance in the ANA, in 2010 for the grade 1, schools reaching national and provincial targets, 29%. 58% of the schools we're working with, 36 schools we're working with, have reached above national and provincial targets. So we've got about 90% of the schools that have reached the national targets and above, which is quite impressive. And you may ask yourself, you know, I've been asked, why don't you just use the Singapore math and, you know, leave the books are expensive and so on. And our approach is, if you're looking at the quality of education and private schools are getting books, we want to give the same thing to the public schools. And but Schulman, the theorist, is describing the reason we're using the books very nicely. And Schulman argues that that the teacher, in order for her to be teaching properly, needs to have the subject matter knowledge. But that is not enough. She also needs to know how to carry the task of teaching. And this is what is called, and the pedagogical content knowledge is a tool that is embedded in these books. And I'll show you an example of a teacher's guide, where the center of the teacher's guide has a picture of a textbook or a workbook that the children will be working with. And around it you can see the instructional procedure, which gives the step-by-step to the teacher on how to use the book. And also what's the guide gives the teachers the consolidation and differentiation, how to work with a weaker child and how to work with a child with a higher ability. I'm going to go now into a little bit more into the characteristic of the Singapore math. The one is the concrete pictorial abstract approach. That I know with the GPLMS they've adopted this approach as well. This is Jerome Bruner's theory that allowed children to acquire full conceptual understanding activities and curriculum. And it is designed in a way that you cannot go to the abstract without going through first the concrete and the pictorial. Another element, very important, depth versus breadth. More time is spent on each topic, fewer topics are covered in a year, greater focus on mastery. So the agreement we had with the Department of Education is that by the end of the phase, by the end of the foundation phase, we will cover the curriculum, because the way the Singapore math curriculum goes is that the grade 1 goes on a much slower pace. They covered less topics, but they work on the idea that the emphasis is on the, as I said before, on the why and not on how. And the curriculum teaches the mastery through understanding and practice, and it takes slower pace before you get the foundation right first. And then obviously afterwards it actually catch up. And that's why the department has agreed that we will implement this project in township schools. Another element is the emphasis on mental math. It's not rote learning. It's actually based on problem solving. And another element is that in the Singapore methodology, they teach the routine, the routine learning, the addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. They teach you different strategies. So if, for example, I had to ask a child, what is 100 minus 2? He can count backwards and answer me 98. But when I ask him 100 minus 97, he obviously won't be able to count backwards. So they teach them different strategies, and that's true to addition, subtraction, and multiplication, division. And when it comes to problem solving as well, what's important to remember, we said at the beginning, the core of the curriculum is the teaching for problem solving. And this is just an example of a question from the books. SCAMP theory is another theory that Singapore Math uses, and that's looking, again, what I've mentioned before, the teaching through the conceptual understanding. And with the teaching of problem solving as well, they have actually books teaching for strategies on dealing with problem solving, and the activities, all the activities that you look at the books have problem solving embedded into them, and they're multi-step problems. There's also another element, if you've noticed in the diagram, the metacognition. Looking at many of the activities in the books, you can see how the teacher can take the child through thinking about the thinking of the problem. Another element that you may have heard is the model method or the bar method. And this actually takes the children from the concrete to the abstract through the pictorial. And since I don't have much time, I'm just going to show you an example. Have a look at this question. And I find the model method can help children and adults as well. You can read the question? And let's just look at the way that in the Singapore, in the model method, they teach the students to solve problems via bars. They break the bars into units, and those units are the bridge to the unknown answer. And if you look, I've got 5 units here, and 2/5 of the students wear glasses, and it's very easy for me to say, okay, 3/5 do not. So this is where the pictorial come between the concrete understanding and the abstract question. And then the second question, again, using the units to answer the question.
I'm sure you also found that very interesting. By helping learners to understand the conceptual side of maths, we find that learners achieve much better results. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you found that story inspiring. We'd love to hear feedback from you. Write to us at helpdesk@learnextra.co.za or leave a post on the Facebook wall. Until next time, goodbye.